Thank you, and welcome again, everyone. We are very happy to welcome you to this innovative EDGE session dedicated to risk and compliance management, a theme that was deeply discussed in the RINGO process. Some big questions were around how to organize risk sharing and compliance management differently within international development and humanitarian actions in ways that's more effective, trust-based, empowering, and equitable. And to do so, how might we co-create partnerships of genuine solidarity between international actors and local civil society, where risk is shared and continuously navigated and negotiated by all stakeholders, including funders. A team of RINGO participants has been experimenting with a potential solution to address power imbalances in the system and has been working almost round the clock on developing a prototype around it and relying partner to move it forward. You'll hear about all of that in the coming 90 minutes, what they did, what they learned, and where they are headed. How are we going to do that? May I ask Catherine or Karim to present the agenda, please? So how are we going to do that? So we're starting with framing and purpose, and then we'll present the prototype and have a Q&A around that. We will also hear from idea carriers on challenges and learnings. And then we have an extremely interesting 25 minutes on reflection from our partners in experimentation and prototyping. Then we'll deep dive into discussion in smaller breakout groups so that you have also the opportunity to share your learning, to get to meet each other, to give us ideas, and to help us move forward on these prototypes. And then we have our closing remarks and we tell you where we are headed next. And this team, this wonderful team of people, is composed of many brains, I would say. The lead idea carrier are Antonia Prentice-Potter, who sadly is not here with us because of an emergency. We have Bert Martin, who's also here and who's going to contribute. We have Miriam Gambini, who's also here. We have Shibwe Henry, Ed Rikosh, Stewart Stuman, Esther Mister, Uzai Ojigo, Suita Velpile, Doris Bassler, Luc Lampierre, and Andres Gomez de la Torre. It's a big team because it's a big topic. Also to note very importantly that this prototype is co-hosted by ICSC and the Global Fund for Community Foundation. This is as a way of presentation, and now we're gonna jump right into a warm-up for us to realize what are the tensions that live at the heart of this risk and compliance challenge. So what's going to happen is that we will want to hear your thoughts about two questions. And the way we're going to do that is that my colleagues of tech facilitation are going to share in the chat, excuse me, a link. And this link is going to take you to one first question where we're going to ask you to add 2 or 3 words. Excuse me. And these words are, what comes to your mind when you think about risk and compliance processes? That's question number 1. Please do add as many words as you can. As you can see, reducing fraud, colonial, blocker, rigid, checks, data. This is moving fast. Unequal, top down. I'm trying to catch all of these words. Mistrust. Excellent. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. Maybe a couple of more words. Bureaucracy. Yeah. So the state of the affair is like pretty bleak, I would say. I'm trying to find a really positive word. control, complex, unequal, fear, paperwork. Yes, there's a lot to deal with. So I will now ask you to go to the next question. And the next question is, what word comes to your mind when you think about trust? Bring it on. Belief, allies, inclusive, fair, credibility, partnership, opportunity, reliance, yes, empathy. Empathy is a big one. Humility, belief, caring. Do what you say. Solidarity, openness, credibility, connection. Yeah, this is still shifting, where you're still adding up words. Openness. That's interesting, right? If we compare the words that we were using in our first cloud and everything that's showing up now, thank you to all for your contribution. Karim, can I ask you to bring us back to the other cloud just to be able to compare a little bit, take us back and forth? And I just ask you to have a look again at that list. And now, Karim, if you can see the first one, the second one, the one on trust. These two clouds represent visually the biggest tensions that are at the heart of the challenge of this prototype. How to balance, how to shift, how to reconcile both, how to bring back the human touch to these processes, how to make it prominent. We will start this presentation with our colleague Antonia Prentice-Potter. Antonia had a last-minute emergency, as I told you, and could not be with us live. So she recorded a video to frame and present what this prototype is about. Once we view that video, Deborah Duane will lead a Q&A and a discussion. So prepare your questions and comments. Grab a paper, put them in the chat, whatever makes you feel comfortable, but do prepare your questions for the section in after those 6 minutes. May I ask, please, Tech Facilitation to bring on Antonia's video, please. Thank you. We can't hear. We still can't hear Antonia. Yes, sharing video and sharing sound as well. Okay. Bear with us just for a second. These are the technical little challenges that we encounter when we are on Zoom. I could try to share the video from my side as well if that doesn't work with Karim.
I can try to do it.
Thank you.
I'm Antonia, and I'm one of the...
Can you hear?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Karim.
Hello, everybody. I'm Antonia, and I'm one of the ideas carriers for the RINGO prototype called Brave Encounters. And it's all about how we might design a new system of risk management and compliance. I'm so happy to be able to share our experience and learnings with you today. I'm really sorry not to be online with you in person. And I am super grateful to my co-ideas carrier, Bert, who is defying time zones to be with you and share with you live some additional experiences and learnings. So what is our prototype about? And what is it trying to achieve? We started off with a set of assumptions, which I think are not very surprising, which were around the idea that our risk management and compliance system tends to reflect the existing power balance in our sector and only takes into account the needs of the dominant or currently more powerful users. So it doesn't go as far as we think it could in terms of actually helping us to construct the sort of trustful relationships and solidarity that could really mean true partnership. As we dug into our assumptions a little bit, we realized that we needed a place to start in this enormous subject. And we thought that maybe the way to go would be to look at people who don't normally talk to each other in the system. We started thinking about, for example, those that design compliance checklists or processes, and then those on the other end who are actually having to implement them as project managers or drafters of reports. And we imagined, what would it be like if these people actually could sit together and see the world through each other's eyes? What do those processes and checklists look like when you've seen them from the perspective of somebody who's implementing them or someone who's designing them? What does it look like from the other side of the fence? And this was really the germ of the idea for our Brave Encounter conversations between donors, international NGOs, and local NGOs. So what is the prototype design itself? We asked ourselves the question about how we could try and reimagine these relationships in a way that was more productive and also more respectful and creative. And we came up with a set of facilitated conversation designs to really try and get people to open up to different perspectives. But in order to really center the conversation, we thought it was important to try and focus in on some particular artifact. We thought it was useful to find some kind of pain point, the stone in the shoe that makes things really difficult or even dangerous for local NGO partners, and for them to explore with the others in this value chain what that actually is there for, what effect is it having, and how might it be done differently. So our idea was to start then to help these three different sets of partners in their conversation imagine how to meet their real risk and compliance needs, but in different ways. So we were really seeing these conversations as a first step in redesigning the system. So everybody found the idea really interesting. We got lots of interest and support, but it was very difficult to settle on an actual testing ground. I'm thrilled, excited, and grateful to announce that we do have a first set of facilitated Brave Encounters taking place in just a few weeks' time in the Philippines. Our partners are joining us online a little bit later today to tell you a little bit why they've decided to take this step. Thank you, Center for Disaster Preparedness in the Philippines, Global Giving, and USAID. The pain point they've chosen is a very interesting one around the required use of donor databases to process the data of project participants. And excitingly, we might also have a second testing ground in Zimbabwe for early 2023, if they like what they hear from the Philippines. A few thoughts on what we've learned. We got a huge amount of interest in this issue, but it was super difficult to land on a testing ground. One of the reasons I want to share is that it's really difficult to talk openly and trustfully about risk, it's a little bit of a conundrum. So you've got to find a relationship where people are actually prepared to put this difficult topic on the table, knowing that it's not going to jeopardize the important work they're doing together. We also felt that people got a bit stuck in the all or nothing approach. The system seems so heavily constructed and embedded, it's a little bit difficult to know where to start with deconstructing it. We hope that these conversations are this thread that can be pulled out of the fabric to start to reweave a different kind of tapestry. So I've been very brief, I hope not too cryptic, but my question to you would be, can you enrich our design with your questions and reflections? And would you join us? Are you inspired by this idea? Would you like to see the design of the workshops and test the prototype in a setting you know? I hope that when I hear about this conversation, that we'll get lots of learning from you all. Thank you very much.
That was Antonia joining us on video. And now I will invite Deborah to lead a Q&A discussion. Deborah, welcome.
Thank you, Mariam. So what's been very interesting about this process, and I want to hear a bit from Bert about this actually, is, you know, that the pain point, she said, trying to get people to speak openly. And I'd love to hear from you, Bert, before I go to questions, and please either put your question in the chat or put your hand up. Why do you think it was so hard? Because this took months to get enough people in the whole supply chain together to be able to test this out. Why do you think that was, Bert?
Well, interestingly, hi, everybody. It's good to see you. Thank you for that question, Deborah. Well, interestingly, when we talked about the stuckness within this system, about how risks and compliances are organized, we analyzed time poverty as a factor. Yeah, that is, you know, we know the arrangements are suboptimal at the moment, but participants in the system struggle to find a time to move towards better solutions. In the very same way, that issue of time poverty was surfacing in our group. Yeah, people were really contributing their own experiences in terms of how risk and compliance was not working optimally and the real life challenges they were facing. But when it came to actually being able to commit to participate in a prototype, many participants really struggled. So time poverty, I think, is something that is really dominant in the system, including when we're trying to shift things towards a better outcome.
Interesting. And I mean, that's something we've heard a lot, about changing the INGO and the civil society system, is that there's a colleague, John Mitchell, who talks about functional inertia. I think that's what you're talking about. Things are working, there's no time, steamroll, move ahead. But you've managed to unpick this fantastic trial to try and build a new trust-based model. And I'm going to ask one more question because no one else is coming up. And then I'm also going to bring in some of the voices of the people who are participating in this trial. What did you feel, Bert, when you saw the Mentimeter and that contrast between trust versus risk, and in terms of, you know, your motivation for doing this prototype?
Well, it's the dissonance we face every day, right? Between understanding and appreciating the reasons why, you know, managing risk and ensuring compliance is important, whilst at the same time, as practitioners, really wanting to move towards collaborations that are effective. And so I think that duality that was showing itself in the Mentimeter is really omnipresent. I guess what I found exciting was, yes, to look at how can we work within this value chain, and each one of us can play a role, and how through collaboration we can try to shift over time to better outcomes. I think there is no silver bullet. So I think it's about allowing us to move gradually towards better outcomes. And I'm motivated by that. And equally, actually, sometimes recognize I myself, as an individual or as an organization, have a role to play. So in other words, it's not only actors within the value chain, they all have a role to play, but it was also an interesting process for self-reflection, to think about your own behaviors, your own actions, historically or current. So for me, it's really holding that tension to move towards better outcomes, not forgetting your own responsibilities and roles within it, rather than just looking at the other actors, who of course all have a role to play.
Thank you. Now we've got some questions coming up in the chat. I'll throw a couple of these to you, Bert, and then I'm going to go to Mariella from Global Giving. So one question is, what's the biggest issue that's been identified, or perhaps that you think will be identified by the two sides in regards to compliance? And I think later on, we're going to do a bit of an exercise about this, but that's one question. And let me go to the next couple of questions, Bert, and you can take them all in a row. The second one is, once you've done the piloting, once the findings have emerged, what then? What do you hope will happen? And then finally, how do we stop people being so fearful of making mistakes and that they pile on risk instead of stripping it back to the bare minimum it needs to be? I think there's a really good example with what happened in safeguarding, and the safeguarding issues around a number of INGOs, that the risk and compliance around that was huge. Is there a better and a different way? Tosca, I'll come back to your question in a bit. Bert, do you want to try and handle a couple of those?
Okay, so I think what our group really tried to embrace is this methodology of prototyping. And in truth, it wasn't easy. We were really excited about it because we saw it as something different from our usual way of working, where we, have a smart idea and then projectize it. We call it a pilot. And then we implement it and ex post kind of evaluate it. And by then, 2 years later, let's say, we're so invested in it that it's very hard to come to any other negative conclusion. So what we found really interesting is this methodology of prototyping, where we understood it to be to, test assumptions, small components of a possible emerging solution. Right? So really allowing that test, learn, adapt approach. And so at this point, I do not know what will over time emerge as the relevant issue. We have this starting point of really looking at bringing together through brave conversations under or unconnected parts of the value chain, and from that seek to learn. So I think we're really excited about the test in a few weeks in the Philippines. I'm very grateful, especially given the challenges we've had to find this testing ground. Very excited to see what will emerge. So, to the question, what is the likely issue and therefore the emerging solution? Well, time will reveal itself. Yeah, and we have this starting point of bringing under and unconnected parts of the system together and see whether building trust can bring us to better outcomes over time, meaning we bring in good practices from across the sector. I think inertia is really something that is preventing sometimes us to move towards those better outcomes. Yeah, we maintain the practices as they have been introduced in the past, and we kind of keep going at that. And I think the fear of changing things that are well established, even if they are considered as suboptimal, is a real issue that I think sits within the system.
Thank you. I'm just bringing things up in the chat, but feel free to raise your virtual hand if you want to ask these questions directly. Does anyone else from the team want to come in and answer some of the questions? Because we've got other people from the prototyping team here. So there was a really interesting one from Tosca about that you end up, if you're working in risk and compliance, you end up with a certain mindset. How do we break through that mindset? So I'd love if anyone else or Bert wants to take that on. There's also a good question from our very own Nana is, was there any discussion about engaging with advocacy in relation to changing donors or INGOs? They pass on those risk and compliance. And this is why I was so excited about this prototype. When we asked a number of INGOs, were those risks and compliance imposed by the INGO, by the donor, the bilateral, a couple of them said to me, no, they were imagined. So they're part of that mindset that Tosca talks about, that you assume you have to do these things. Does anyone from the prototyping team, including Bert, want to come in on any of those? I see Chibwe here. We'd love to hear from you, Chibwe, if you want to have a go at any of those.
Thanks, Deborah. I was just looking at Nana's question about, advocacy, engaging in advocacy. So one of the reasons for the prototype was to generate the evidence we needed to go out and engage with, other funders. And we were trying to come away from just talk and show evidence that it works. So instead of just saying, this is what we're trying to do, have a look, have you thought about it? But actually having evidence to show that this is something that can be done. And this is these are the conversations that need to happen. This is where we are. So definitely advocacy is a key element of what the prototyping team is doing, but we want to have a basis to build on and not just go to those sectors with words. Yeah. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to take one more question in this section, which is one Vanessa asked, is one of the aims to identify ways that organizations in the global north can act more of a risk or buffer rather than passing them on to organizations in the global south. And we like to talk in RINGO, rather than using global north, global south, we try to talk about international, national, local. And if so, in what kinds of practical ways? Does anyone from the team, I think Osai, I think you're in this prototyping team. Does anyone want to take that on, or even your hypothesis about what might come out of this prototype? Osai, do you want to have a go? I'm putting you on the spot. If not, I'm going to have to go back to Bert or someone else. I can't see everybody's name.
Osai is muted.
Maybe just to share quickly that what was really interesting about our discussions was the fact that this could potentially be a game changer in terms of the burden that local NGOs face, but also the fact that there seems to, we are all fighting for the same goal, but we seem to be on different teams when you have to deal with the high burden of reporting that is expected of receiving organizations. And I think one good success from this would essentially be the courage for everyone involved in the process, from whether you're a donor, whether you are the INGO partnering with a national or local NGO, to have the courage to step back and to say, we believe you, we accept what is before us. This is not an us and them situation, but rather we are working together to achieve our goal. But there's a lot of fear about people losing positions and about people showing up in a way that is not natural to them. So there's openness to see what will come out of this, and hopefully this would be a starting point for a best practice in reality terms as to how the organizations of how we deal with this, sharing this burden looks like. Thank you.
Great. Bert, you're going to give us a few words on some of the challenges. I know you've already talked about the time factor, but maybe take a couple of minutes to tell us a bit more about the challenges. And at the same time, if you can, maybe take on Tara's questions, which is, are there any conditions or factor that you have identified to base your prototype to begin with? So I think that's a really good starting point at this one. Thanks, Bert. Over to you.
Okay. Thank you. So I'd like to just build on Antonia's presentation of the work we've undertaken so far, and in the spirit of brave conversations, maybe also share some of the challenges that we encountered. One in relation to the methodology, and a second one in relation to the ways of working. And I think we've learned from this and therefore see real opportunities going forward. As I hinted at earlier, I think from the onset, I think many members in the group were really excited about the methodology of systems thinking, which we did as a collective, but then also as prototyping, which we did as a group. And so building on that identification of stuckness within the system, we wanted to pursue a different approach, different from the traditional way that I hinted at earlier, whereby we projectize an idea, we call it a pilot, we implement it in full and then evaluate it ex post. We understood this methodology, and thanks to our coach for her support in this, to be somewhat different, whereby we really seek to test iteratively small components of a possible emerging solution. And we use the learning from those tests to build and to iterate forward, and to really focus on the assumptions we tend to hold and see whether in practice they hold true. And so holding on to that methodology was really hard, because we tended to always want to kind of focus on a big solution. And so, as Antonia shared, our first prototype is really about seeing whether by bringing under or unconnected members of the value chain together, we can build trust, and from trust, we can actually explore better arrangements. Now, the challenge here was that doing this kind of testing takes time, and it's somewhat different from maybe the IT innovation world where prototyping comes from. It is different because it involves multiple stakeholders, it involves power. And so it was very different from, say, testing a widget on a new app or a new function on a website. And so I think the learning we've had is that whilst we're really excited about this different way of working, it takes us more time than originally imagined. And so the 6 months went by very fast, and we are keen to move forward, but that's one learning. I think a second, maybe personal reflection was in relation to the ways of working, and our very strong bias as a sector for collaboration amongst peers. And indeed, RINGO in its setup is really bringing in diverse actors, and that's really enriching and exciting. And so from the very beginning, we had many participants in our group. Most of them are here today, and we had very enriching conversations, and I learned, and we all learned a huge amount. Yet at the same time, as Antonia shared, we struggled to find amidst ourselves a testing ground, an organization, an issue, a relationship on which we can build in order to do this test. And it made me personally reflect whether the time that it required for us to coordinate amongst ourselves, which was very significant, maybe prevented us also from actually acting. And whether, upon reflection, it would have been maybe better to focus on 1 or 2 organizations, maybe including my very own organization, to drive an initiative forward. And so I guess my second reflection is how to balance our very strong desire for collaboration within the sector with action, and whether we need to lean forward more. So a lot of learnings here in terms of that tension between collaboration and action, and really also learning around how we prototype, do it differently, even though it is somewhat hard to get into the rhythm. Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you, Bert. Lots of reflections there, and there's so much learning already, even though we're still just steamrolling ahead to doing this first trial, having pinned that down. One question I want to ask before I go to Mariella is, and this is a perfect link to Mariella, is do INGOs and donors, this is from Jesus Melendez from IREX, do INGOs and donors consider local and national NGOs inherently riskier to manage? You know, is that the assumption? Is that the starting assumption? Do you want to have a go at that, Bert? And then I'll bring in Mariella.
I regret to say, I think that is the narrative that is there often implicitly. Yeah, but indeed, when as practitioners we interrogate that, we would very often arrive at a very opposite conclusion. Yes, there are different types of risks, that is for sure, and there are different ways of managing it, but it does not certainly mean that local organizations are inherently more risky. So it is a very strong dominant narrative out there that really needs interrogating. And I think when we pause and interrogate it, say through a brave conversation, as proposed in this prototype, I think we can really unpack it and dismantle it. But regretfully, it is a very common narrative, and it's a lazy shortcut that is often present in conversation. So it does need questioning, in my view.
And I do know, I heard anonymously, I won't reveal the source, but someone from a large bilateral organization said, we don't care if an INGO wastes $1 million, we care if a local CSO wastes $1, because we are given trouble for that from our political powers. So there are some political issues that have to be responded to. Unfortunately, Jay DeQueros from USAID, who is participating in this prototype, was unable to be with us today. He sends his apologies. But what we do have is Mariella Montel from Global Giving in the Philippines, who is participating. And maybe you can bring on your screen, Mariella, so we can see you. Mariella, what I want to ask you is, why did you agree to participate in this prototype? What is your experience of risk and compliance now? Is it fair? Is it proportionate? And how do we generate more trust in the system? And I'm efficiently putting all of my questions to you at once. Are you there, Mariella? I see you somewhere.
Hi.
Great. Thank you. Do you want to have a chat to us?
Sure. And if you can post your questions to the chat and I can just go through them. I have a few answers to them already. And I also had prepared a couple of words, but through this conversation, it's already adapting. So this is a learning festival and I'm already learning and adapting on the go. So the first thing that I will just like to explain is just 2 minutes on how the program that we are working on, how it was designed, and then hopefully logically you will understand why this is actually a very interesting prototype for us. So the program that we're implementing right now is called Assets, Agency and Trust. Global Giving is part of a consortium of organizations that are implementing this program. Global Giving sitting in the UK, the Global Fund for Community Philanthropy, for Community Foundations sitting in South Africa, NFF sitting in the US, working on how to build financial sustainability and sort of non-financial capacities for organizations, and our perhaps most fundamental partner is CDP, the Center for Disaster Preparedness in the Philippines. They are the ones who are working with the organizations in the Philippines day in and day out, and they're absolutely key to this partnership. And the program is called Assets, Agency and Trust, in the hopes of highlighting how important it is to understand assets in a different way, beyond money, beyond financial flows, how that builds agency as well, and how it is important to recognize the agency that community partners already hold. So this is not about only or not even building capacities or building new assets. It's about recognizing the assets that are already there, that are already in practice, and outsiders, let's call the global north, are not recognizing and are not seeing, perhaps because they don't want to, perhaps because they can't. So we're trying to understand the context in which community-led development is already happening in the Philippines. And we're also recognizing from the start, but it's being reinforced all the time how trust is absolutely essential for community-led philanthropy, not only in country, but around, let's say, the chain or the partnerships through different levels for community philanthropy. So because trust is at the heart of community-led philanthropy, and this has been a lesson that is very clear on the ground, and as we go, we've also been observing how that trust is hard to translate and to scale up throughout this development chain. And this is very much linked to accountability, to the concept of accountability, and to the question, who are we accountable to? And this question has traditionally been answered by following the money, right? So where is the money coming from? So if it's coming from an international donor, then we have to be accountable to the international donor. Where does that money come from? Perhaps from taxpayers or from a philanthropist, or so we have to be accountable to a board, or we have to be accountable to public. And we're trying to flip that question and expand, who are we accountable to? We are also accountable to our communities. So global giving, for example, sitting sort of in the middle of this chain, of course, is accountable to USAID, who are financing this program. But we are also accountable to our partners and to the organizations in the Philippines. This is not a top-down intervention, and so this needs to be a conversation. So that also leads to what are the questions that have been at the when we're thinking about risk compliance and about these questions around trust. It seems that it always boils down to, from one end, so what are you going to do with the money that I'm giving you? And the other one, why won't you trust me with the money that you're giving me? And this, of course, creates a mistrust, but there is rarely an opportunity for pushback, especially from the organizations in country, and let alone a space for conversation. So we're really excited about this prototype because we feel it's connecting two of the nodes from where mistrust comes from, because it's also important to recognize that it's not only what it would see the obvious mistrust from international organizations funding this activity, saying, you need to prove to me that you're going to do what you're supposed to be doing with this money. How can I trust you? But this also creates a mistrust on the other end. And this is important to recognize as well, that we need to build trust on both ends, and they're equally important. So yeah, we think this is a conversation that's a great opportunity sort of to learn and adapt ideas and practices and change mindsets, as we've already been talking about. Because, so I'm just thinking about Tara's comments way up in the chat by now, probably on how trust can be. For me, trust is both the result and a prerequisite for this prototype, because also bringing in the partners into this brave conversations, as we're referring to, requires an initial level of trust in who is bringing us into the room, who will be in that room. And so we hope that the fact that global giving is a part of this, and we assume and we hope that we're trusted by all the parties in this conversation. We just hope to be building these bridges, but also with a view of not needing this bridge building in the future, for a future in which we can remove ourselves, and this conversation is still happening, and this trust has already been built, and it's already there. I'm not sure if I answered all of your questions, Deborah, but feel free to ask another one.
I think that was great, and I think it really highlights the way the team came down with the framing of this as a brave conversation, right? Because everybody in the supply chain, in the value chain, needed to be brave, right? The donor needed to be brave, but the recipients, the bearing your soul about to those in people of power, I think is a really important and challenging thing to do. And it's really the heart of solidarity, which is a theme across all of our prototypes. How do we generate those new models? I like Bert's comment there. In designing this prototypes, we were wondering what are manifestations of trust or lack of, and by unpacking this, will it give us insights into those emerging solutions? I'm going to turn now. We have a video by Mike Mercado from the Center for Disaster Preparedness, who is someone else who has agreed to bare his soul and participate in the brave conversation. Can we pull up that video, and hopefully the sound will work well? Over to the tech team. There are many of you who hopefully will do this.
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Vincent Mercado. I am the Technical Assistance Program Coordinator of the Center for Disaster Preparedness Foundation based in the Philippines. And I'm here to talk about how we in the Assets Agency and Trust Program are finding answers to the important question of how do we balance power in the development system to support people's own priorities in advanced community-led development. First and foremost is the focus on financial requirement. And what we have on the AAD program are organizations that are smaller, more grassroots, more community-based, formed by people, like-minded individuals within the communities who want to really effect change and confront their issues and address their needs and gaps. So we didn't want to do more of those financial requirements, but we wanted to do more conversations and really figure out how CDP can work with them as opposed to making them work but not really do the work, you know what I mean? So we just require them to send in their the documents that they currently have. For example, their annual reports or their these requirements are readily available within the organization, so they can comply with that easily. And so now the due diligence process that we have actually just tries to bring out or surface some of the ways or some of the unique ways, for example, that they do their work and how CDP can then enter the scene and complement that and strengthen their capacities to do more. There's no problem with working with formal organizations, but what you're missing out on are organizations that are really doing the work, mostly volunteer-based, and are creating ripples of changes in their communities, but are ignored by the system just because they're not registered. And that's what the AAT tried to really address in this program, because we really wanted to involve as many invisible, often neglected organizations to enable them to sort of do more and contribute more to their communities. What an external donor can contribute to them is actually amplifying or speeding up the process of getting them from point A to B, where B is the change they wanted to achieve. And the third one is what we are trying to also do is community assets within, community assets are not often reflected on the ledgers of programs, because they're just not, because they're seen as free and therefore unimportant. What we're trying to do here is really account for the real value of doing the work, because for example, you have volunteers that are, working, they often do not receive compensation because for them, receiving money is just pure unacceptable, because it's their way of helping out. So sometimes those type of individuals are the most helpful to the program or to any solutions that are being done by the communities, but they're invisible to the system because they're not, you know, they're not weighed in the balance sheets or the accounting financial reports. What we plan to do is teaching organizations, even smaller organizations,
Oh, we're having a little bit of a problem with the streaming.
to put value or to really account for these types of community assets that are often overlooked. What we want is that for community efforts to be long-lasting, because changes, you know, in our communities are not necessarily going to be achieved by a one-off intervention. It takes time. Changes takes time. We all already know that. And most of these problems that we have are systemic, and so therefore it needs more thoughtful interventions, and people in the community are the ones that know more about their issues and contacts, and so they must be supported that way.
Terrific. Unfortunately, Mike is not live with us, so we can't ask him any questions. But there was lots that he had in there in terms of what the organization's doing and what's important in this prototype. And for me, that systemic dimension is really why we brought RINGO together. These are not things that one organization on their own can fix. You need to convene the system. And it's great seeing in the chat, someone messaged me directly, another person put it up there, I think from Oxfam Nova, that they'd like to try this out. So I'm going to, maybe urge the team to possibly come up with some guidance documents about how another group might be able to trial this sort of thing out in their own setting with their own supply chain. I want to take Maya's question, and I want to bring this to Mariella, which is, there is a lot of evidence out there about trust. You know, the cash transfers research, people who work in the humanitarian sector and development sector will be familiar with that. I wonder if, Mariella, has Global Giving got research that you've looked at about trust and things like cash transfer and the impact of flexible, unrestricted funding for local organizations? Can you take that on, Mariella?
I can. I'm really happy to, so I'll try to restrain myself because Global Giving, I don't know how familiar people are with its work. It's usually understood as a platform in which partners connect to move funding. And it's very much community-led in the sense that the funding is for any activities or needs that the organizations themselves find that they need the funding for. But it's very much a platform. However, there's a smaller team that is testing. I think the way that we would describe ourselves would be testing innovations within more traditional development programmatic work, let's say. So we have a program that is about to end in Tanzania, in which we tested an innovative or a slightly different, more flexible approach to grant making to smaller organizations. And again, I see, for example, in the chat how many recognize the importance of funding and supporting organizations that are unregistered. And again, this goes to the heart of how can I trust you? And for many organizations and many donors, the answer is going to be because you have certain systems, because you have this paperwork, because you have this track record, because you have this financial audits. And why do people in the communities trust these organizations? Rarely have to do with the amount of paperwork and institutional sort of structure that they have. However, I just recently came back from a visit in Tanzania, after talking to some of the partners that we supported through this grant making, through the program called Kukuzo Weso that was funded by the National Lottery Community Fund here in the UK. And it was a grant making facility that was quite flexible in terms of what you could do with the money, and the only sort of broad topic was around capacity building, quote unquote, capacity building. Why we had this broader approach, and this was because talking to partner organizations, networks there, working specifically in the disability sector, which is the kind of organizations that we funded for this program, they realized that many organizations were doing great work. However, they lacked, sometimes they themselves said they lacked support to build some of this, say, structural capacities to better deliver. So we said, here's a grant. The paperwork for the applications was much less than it's traditionally required, but also there was very careful following up with the organizations through this application process. So they would send the application, we would get back to them with feedback and say, listen, we still need a little bit more information around this. So instead of saying your application was not successful, we gave feedback and said, this would not go through because we still need this and this information, for example. So this meant a process in which almost every organization was successful in the first round, and every organization was successful in the second round to get funding. So already there's already an impact because organizations who can't really access funding in traditional and even less traditional settings, they were telling me about how they were really excited about getting this funding. And also this, many of them, what they did with the money was work with consultants to build some of these documents that would make them trustworthy to more traditional organizations. So some of them are actually now receiving funding from more traditional settings. So while we are trying to build evidence that you don't necessarily need all this documentation and all this sort of structures in your institution, it's also very important to support this, because this is the ecosystem in which we are working with right now. So it's let's say a double a program that goes both ways, and the impact has been amazing. Some of them, I think my favorite example, I don't want to play favorites, organizations did amazing work, but perhaps the one that struck with me the most was an organization who used most of the money to buy big screen flat screen TVs, big ones, huge ones, to put them in their offices. And I think if you would go traditionally to say, oh, I want to buy TVs, probably traditional grant making would say, no, this is not what the money is for, right? But what they did was put them up, and Tanzania is a country in which football is very popular and people like to, it's a social activity to watch football together. So they were having these huge TVs to watch the games, to watch the World Cup, to watch like matches, national and international, and they would charge a small fee for the entrance and sell some drinks and sell some things that other organizations are producing, for example. So it became financially sustainable, this organization, through buying these TVs. And it was one of my favorite examples, because usually it would not be something that would be accepted in many other grant makings. And it would be perhaps a red flag saying that you spent most of the money buying TVs. So there's some evidence, and I know probably I'm a bit on time. So there is some evidence that we're building, and we will be very excited to share with you. And hopefully the AAT program as well will build more evidence on that. But I would love to hear if there is anything else published right now. I see a link already that I've bookmarked.
Great, thank you. Lots of information on trust and research, Tosca. Maybe you can join this prototyping team through this trial, or offer some advice to the team. You've got a lot to offer. I think we need to move on to our next session, and I urge you to stay to the end, because you're going to find out what will happen next. This is, we're sort of halfway through. We wanted to be sharing as much as possible with you as we go along to generate the community spirit and all this wonderful community learning out there. So stay to the end of the session to find what happens next. I'm going to hand it back to our wonderful RIOS facilitator in Beirut. Mariam, over to you.
Thank you, Deborah. So this is a learning and exchange festival, and this room is so rich in experience and knowledge. And we realized from the chat that you have a lot of questions and a strong wish for collaboration. And also this prototyping team would like to tap into your wisdom and your experience. So we thought to open a space for exchange and open breakout rooms of 3 people for 10 to 12 minutes for you to exchange. We have a guiding, 3-4 guiding questions, and we would love if you could log in your insights while talking so that we can gather them as well. So what's going to happen is that we're going to open breakout rooms, and we're going to put in the chat a Google Doc in which you can log in your insights. And we're going to also post these guiding questions. You may decide to follow them, or you may decide to discuss of other things that you're interested in, or just meet. But we're going to open them for 12 minutes, and then we're going to be back and give you the opportunity to share some of them as well. So facilitation, tech facilitation team, are you ready? I guess they are always ready. So if you can send people into breakout rooms, that would be fantastic, excluding us, so that you can stay in the main room and monitor what's happening. Thank you. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you for being here.
We forgot to ask our tech team not to necessarily include the core team into those breakouts.
Oh, I just said that, but I don't know if they had already included us.
I think they have, because I was given the option to join. So there may be some very small groups.
Our team can reallocate.
Okay, are we able to see if there's 3 people in all of the groups?
Let's just make sure that everyone joins, and then if needed.
Yeah. Yeah, 3 people we may should have done 4 people in case people don't join, so they don't drop out. Learning as we go.
Yeah. And even if there were 2 people, I think the conversation would still be interesting. And we have people coming in, joining again.
Yeah, I have to admit, I ended up in a group of 2 people,
Yeah.
and the other person was not visible nor audible, so I decided I'd come back because I didn't.
No problem, Wolfgang. We'll just send you to another team.
No worries. Somewhere else, exactly.
Yes. Please, tech team. We still have Wolfgang, Steven, Debbie, Rihanna, and Amina.
If you click on breakout rooms at the bottom, you might be able to self-select to join a group.
I seem to have a breakout room assigned to me, but when I go in, it's just me inside of it.
Ah, thank you for letting us know, Amina. So we will send you to another breakout group then.
All right, thanks.
We still have a couple of people. Rihanna, Stephen, Andrew, are you here?
Yes, there was nobody in my room, so I came back. Can I be allocated somewhere else?
We're going to reallocate you somewhere else.
Thank you.
Catherine, could you reallocate Andrew? Or Andrew, you can also, if you go to breakout rooms, do you think, can you see the other rooms? Can you auto-allocate yourself?
I can join number 1. Thank you.
Perfect. We still have, I think, one person who's Stephen. Maybe Stephen is not available. So what we could do, maybe Catherine can send us as facilitation team to a breakout room.
I think just leave us here for now. Just let's not add the extra layer of complication.
If there's nothing crucial, stay here.
No. It's good. There was a comment, sorry, for those of you who are listening in, welcome. There was the little conversation in the WhatsApp group about plenaries in general. People really want to hear the overall thing and stay in plenary. So we need to think about our next sessions to see if we stay in plenary or if we still do breakout groups.
You mean in sessions?
Yeah. From here on in, yeah.
Learning as we go.
Balance.
It's
a learning festival.
And now we can allocate now a little bit of time to share insights in plenary. So we encourage people to share insights in the chat, to unmute themselves, and to populate the Google Sheet to which they all have access.
I'm just going to go take a comfort break. Oh, sorry, Barbara. Do you want us to bump you into another room?
No, it's all the minutes have gone. I don't think we have so much time. Don't worry.
Okay, well, you can click on, I don't know if you can see in the chat, you can click on what people are saying in the Google Doc.
Yes.
Sorry, technology, we're all learning as we go here.
No problem.
We have people joining in again.
Great. We'll be starting up in, you will have missed the breakout sessions, or apologies if you had problems with your breakout team, but we'll be starting up again in about 3 minutes in plenary.
It's good because some people are populating the Google. And now when they come back, we can also ask them, like as we speak, to add a couple of things to the Google Doc.
I've had an email from someone who joined this group a little bit late, just saying how interesting it is and wants to understand more and wants to be connected. So I'll forward that to you, Bert and Antonia. Well, I know Antonia's not here, but I'll forward it to you both.
Sparkle, I guess Catherine is doing that, but maybe it would be interesting to save the entire chat. I mean, it's necessary to save the entire chat to transfer it to the group. There are so many interesting questions, recommendations, advice, call for collaboration.
Yeah, I'll save it all at the end. I've been taking notes, but there's been quite a few people needing help with access as well, so I probably missed a bit, so I have to go back to the recording.
Is someone giving, I don't know if it's Kareem or Catherine, giving 2 minutes notice or 1 minute notice to the team, to the breakout group?
Should be a 1 minute notice.
1 minute?
Actually, Zoom itself automatically gives them a 1 minute notice.
Great.
So we're gonna have just a couple of minutes for insights. Catherine, can you tell us how many minutes in breakout groups people still have?
It would be 1 minute, Miriam.
Why do you see that and I don't?
Well, I'm just looking at the time. It's 14:33 and you said to 14:34, so.
I thought you were looking at it somewhere on the screen. And
I'm old-fashioned, babe, old-fashioned.
I'm old-fashioned.
Paper never fails.
Yeah, paper all the way.
Yes. So please do give them a minute notice so that we can close the rooms in a minute.
Yeah, definitely. It's 14:34. We should bring everybody back. We'll see how many people stayed with us.
I counted. There were approximately 45 people in breakouts.
Oh, so you do lose people. We do have to think about that. Are you all ready, Miriam? Be next.
We're going to ask, yes, for some insights in the chat first, and then we'll give it over to Miriam, and then closing remarks with Bert and Miriam.
Where is everybody?
People are coming back, a lot of them with big smiles. So we could assume that it was interesting conversation. We do hope it was interesting conversations. While others are coming back, it would be wonderful to hear from you. So if you have any insights, any interesting things that you learned or that you want to share, please do put it in the chat. Or if you'd like to share it live, just show us, raise a hand, and then you can share. It would also be great to populate that Google sheet that is actually being populated quite fast. So we have time to take 1 or 2 interventions. If someone is really, really eager to share, please present yourself. I cannot see everyone. So, I can see someone raising his real hand. Mustafa. Mustafa Fay, here you go.
But my name is Mustafa Fay, and I am a PhD candidate in medical anthropology at Laval University. And I have, in the past, I'm a volunteer in Quebec, Oxfam, Quebec. Now, 10 years ago, for 12 years, 13 years. And I think when you talk about confidence, it's very important you contextualize the concept, and the reality. And because concept is very limitative. Je pense que je vais parler français si vous voulez, parce que c'est important pour moi de dire ce que je veux partager en français. Mon anglais n'est pas tellement fort là. Et je vous remercie d'abord parce que j'ai pris le train en marche, parce que vous parlez de la confiance dans les organisations internationales. Je pense que c'est une question pertinente, mais le concept en soi peut être très, un concept qui a des limites quand on le met sur le terrain. Parce que j'étais Oxfam, j'étais dans l'équipe d'Oxfam Québec comme bénévole pendant des années, mais il n'y avait pas cette confiance dont vous parlez en tant que moi, étranger, chercheur, doctorant à l'université. J'ai fait beaucoup de plaidoyer pour Oxfam, mais je n'ai jamais eu cette confiance vis-à-vis des gens avec qui je travaillais. Et je pense que cette même méfiance, c'est ce qu'on trouve sur le terrain. C'est ça que je voulais partager avec vous et j'ai partagé avec le groupe. Il faut faire beaucoup attention parce que l'Occident n'a jamais eu confiance pour moi. Ça, c'est ma perception. Et ça fait 17 ans que je vis en Occident. L'Occident n'a jamais eu confiance en nous. C'est à nous de faire confiance en nous-mêmes. Quand je parle de nous, je parle de l'Afrique. Et je parle de moi en tant qu'Africain. Et l'Occident n'aura jamais de confiance à l'Afrique. Ça, il faut que vous mettez ça en tête. En tout cas, moi, c'est comme ça que je perçois les choses. C'est à nous de construire notre confiance et de prouver aux gens qu'on est capable de faire des choses, changer le monde, apporter à l'humanité quelque chose de positif. Ça, c'est ma perception. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Mustafa. Merci pour votre intervention. Thank you, Mustafa, very much for your intervention. Would anyone else would like to have a last intervention?
Mariam, do you think you could just summarize what he just said for those who are not French speaking?
Yes. So Mustafa was saying that in his long years experience with Oxfam, he never saw that trust from the Occidental part of the world towards Africa. And Mustafa is saying that Africans need to trust themselves in order to bring about change, because in his own experience, he hasn't seen anything coming from the partner that would invite for trust building. And Mustafa, please let me know if I translated well or if I missed anything. Was that good? You're muted. Mustafa, you're muted. We can't hear you.
You say well, Miriam. African need to keep your destiny in your own main. You know, you don't. Yeah, you don't. Occident va développer l'Afrique. No, I don't believe that. I want to believe. I want to go to my continent to develop my continent. But white people don't develop. He develop his country. His But when I say some concept around this meeting, like this meeting, I'm not happy. I send you after my conference with Université de Montréal, and the big one on Oxfam, Quebec, and another big one on University of Ottawa to talk about vaccination. Vaccination is the best example. Vaccination about COVID-19. I wanna share this one after. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. Mary, you've been having your hand up for a while, so we still have a minute. We're gonna give you the floor, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you. So my point was just a brief one, and it's around the conversation of basing things on trust, which at times can sound like we're just being hopeful and we're hoping it's going to work out. But actually, really what we're saying, aren't we, is that we know from evidence, knowledge and understanding that delivery based in local organisations understands what needs to be delivered, how to deliver it much better than us. And therefore, based on knowledge and evidence, we understand it's going to be better. And that's more than trust. And actually not doing it then becomes a risk of not delivering well.
Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you to all of you for those insightful, brave conversation that were started here in that session. I will now give the floor to Miriam Gambini, who's gonna talk to us about where are we going next, and then we'll have 2 minutes for closing remark from Bert and Miriam. Miriam? Miriam, we can't hear you for some reason, although you don't seem muted. Still not.
Apologies.
Yeah, it works.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah, so saying I'm a project manager at the International Civil Society Center, also known as ICSC, and a member of the RINGO team. At the center, we are a global network convening international civil society organizations and supporting them in maximizing their impact and transformative power. And as mentioned at the beginning of this session, we have had the pleasure to co-host this prototype together with the Global Fund for Community Foundations. So as part of the co-hosting of the prototype, the center really wanted to support the expansion of the idea at the root of the prototype. It's embedding in order to influence change in the sector and in the wider ecosystem. And a pivotal aspect to that was the stabilization and also sustainability of the idea in the longer term, to ensure that the prototype could function in a way that really shifts relationships, mindsets, and also models. To this end, next year, the center intends to provide an avenue for the prototype testing and its learning with the aim to foster policies, practices that can create more enabling conditions for local organizations, as well as to foster discussions with all these underconnected actors that we have talked about today. So this will happen in the framework of our Accelerating Inclusive Power Shift project, which sets out to foster more inclusive governance models, to support organizations in revising their future mandate, as well as to strengthen the collaboration between international civil society organizations and donors in order to enable more equitable partnerships, particularly with Global South-based actors. So through the prototype building and also building on the donor dialogue series of the center, we will seek to promote constructive dialogue between civil society and donors as the other main addresses of power shift demands. And we really endeavor to move towards commitment and, most importantly, action that one group could not advance fully without the other, with the ultimate objective to truly transition from risk as a paper-based, let's say, exercise to a dialogue and learning exercise. So we really look forward to taking up the learnings from the current testing phase in the Philippines and to continue with creating next iterations and outputs from the prototype testing, bringing together stakeholders to develop set commitments and help overcome the blockages that still exist for what concerns achieving power shift in the sector. We have seen today that there is quite a lot of engagement from you and interest in this topic. So if you really want to contribute to this effort, we would like to hear from you, and we'd like to also have you join us in designing the next iterations of the prototype. So we really invite you also to join us for the rest of the sessions at the festival. We will have, we'll learn from other prototypes, and we will also see how they evolve and then connect with each other. And also, very importantly, join us for the closing sessions, where we will also discuss what are the next steps for the RINGO project and RINGO Lab as a whole. So we are now heading towards the end of this session, and I will give the floor to Bert Martin for some closing remarks. So over to you, Bert.
Great, thank you, Miriam. I can only echo what Miriam has said. Thank you so much for the great exchange of ideas, the references. There's so much in the chat. It's 2 a.m. here, but I'm very excited about all what emerged from this conversation. I love how people started talking about trust, the lack of trust, and how we may need to interrogate this, how we can unpack this. And I think herein sits really the potential of this prototyping methodology to allow ourselves to test, learn, and adapt small components of what we believe is an emerging solution, and to iterate forward. Yes, to sometimes fail, but learn from it. After all, to fail stands for our first attempt in learning. So I'm really excited by the energy and the ideas that people have offered. So if you want to join this process and you want to be part of one small test where we interrogate an assumption, whether it's on the trust side or the self-confidence side, whatever aspect of this new emerging solution that we are working towards, feel free to contact me, and Antonia will get my email in the chat. So please join us. Very keen to work with whoever across this whole system wants to work towards change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bert. Thank you, everyone. We're on time, and we really do hope to see you again in another session later today, tomorrow, or the day after. Thank you for your wonderful energy and your insights, and have a great end of day, beginning of day, wherever you are in the world. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, Luke.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, team. I'm going to go. Miriam and I are in another session. I need 5 minutes to step away. So we'll catch up with you all later. Thanks, Bert, so much for stepping in for Antonia. I think it was absolutely worth it. Lots to do and lots of energy. So it's really terrific. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm also going to my other session. I just asked facilitation team and Sparkle just to save the chat for all the nuggets of gold in there.
I've just done it. Miriam, will you please send me, and Bert actually, will you send me any like speaking notes that you have so that I can make sure that they're all compiled if they're not